Good morning, everyone.
Morning, ma'am.
Morning, ma'am.
So today we're going to talk about modal and non-modal verbs, specifically of obligation and compulsion. And this time we're going to use examples. Now, for our activity, the instruction is to say check if the sentence has the correct usage of modals and say cross if the meaning of the sentence was not applicable, thus has the wrong use of modal. So is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So let's start. For a strong obligation, sentence number 1, you must be 18 or older to vote. Is it a strong obligation?
Check, ma'am.
Okay, check. Why? Because it is an official or written rule, specifically of a country, that you must be 18 or older for you to vote. Okay, number 2, I should eat more vegetables. Is it a strong obligation or not a strong obligation?
Cross, ma'am.
Cross po, ma'am.
Yes, that's right. It is cross. It is not a strong obligation. However, it is a weaker one because it is an opinion. Okay, number 3. She has to finish the test by 5. Is it a strong obligation? What do you think?
Check, ma'am.
Yes,
Check
that's
po, ma'am.
it is checked because there is a rule or a requirement made by the teacher that the test should be finished with before or at exactly 5 o'clock. Okay, next. You should quit smoking. Is it a strong obligation?
Cross, ma'am.
Okay,
Cross, ma'am.
cross because it is an opinion. Now, remember, strong obligation uses have to and must, whereas have to shows obligation imposed from outside the speaker by rules or circumstances. For example, what we used earlier, the right or the law. Then must shows obligations created by the person speaking. Now, for the weak obligation, sentence number 1, we should avoid going out late. Is it a weak obligation? Check or cross?
Check.
Check,
Check.
ma'am.
Yes, very good. Because it is an advice in which one can choose to follow or to ignore. So if you want to stay out late, it's your choice. But the one who is speaking is advising you to avoid going out late. Okay, number 2, you ought to be at work on time. Is it a strong obligation or weak obligation? Is it check or cross?
Check,
Check,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes,
Check, ma'am.
it is check because weak obligation includes opinion. But this time, it is an opinion that still has to be followed. Now, number 3, you must attend the interview. Is it a weak obligation?
Cross po, ma'am.
Cross,
Cross,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, it is cross. Why? Because must is used when something is necessary. So it is not weak obligation, but rather a strong obligation. That's why it is cross. Okay, number 4. Children have to go to school. Check or cross?
Cross, ma'am.
Cross, ma'am.
Yes, that's right. Why? Because it is also a strong obligation. There is an external right that says kids should study or the children has the right to study or to have an education. Okay, now remember, weak obligation uses should and ought to. The other one, the strong obligation, we use have to and must. Okay. Whereas should shows advice and opinions. It can be obeyed or ignored, just like our example. Now, ought to has a very similar meaning to should, but a lot stronger. Just like our example earlier, it is an opinion that still has to be followed. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, next, for advice, suggestions, and recommendations, sentence number one. You have to wear uniform in class. Is this sentence shows advice, suggestions, and recommendations?
Cross, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am.
it is cross. Why? Because um, it is a strong obligation, specifically a school regulation that needs to be followed, right? Because in school, there is a requirement to wear uniform. Next, he ought to come back tomorrow. Is it check or cross?
Check,
Check,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay, that is check because it is a recommendation for him to come back tomorrow. Now, number three, you should keep out of the sun. Check or cross?
Check, ma'am. Ma'am.
Why? Because it is a suggestion. Number four, we must fasten our seatbelt.
Check, ma'am. Check po.
Okay, that's right. Because it is a type of advice in which it is necessary according to the speaker. Now, remember, advice, suggestions, and recommendations use must, should, and ought to. So you can choose whatever you want to use. Now, must, should, and ought to can be used to give a strong suggestion, strong advice, encouragement, or even an implied request. Now, I have here a sentence, an incomplete sentence, um, which says, you blank study hard to pass the exam. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pick a modal and a non-modal in order to complete this sentence, and we're going to um, see if there is a difference between each modal, if it changes the meaning of the sentence. Is that clear?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're going to start with have to. You have to study hard to pass the exam, meaning there is an external rule, for example, a house rule or standard that needs to be passed if not maintained. So, for example, your parents told you to pass the exam. So, there is a law or there is a rule that needs to be followed. So, that is why um, when we use have to, it became a strong obligation. Okay. Now, next, we are going to use must. What is the meaning of this sentence when we use the modal must? Now, let us all read. You must study hard to pass the exam, meaning it is crucial to ace the exam, and so it is necessary to study hard. Okay. So next, we are going to use should. You should study hard to pass the exam, meaning if you study, you'll get good marks. However, there is still a choice and it's up to you. If you don't study hard, then you won't pass the exam. That's it. Okay. Then the last one, you ought to study hard to pass the exam, meaning if you want to pass, if you really want to pass, then you'll make sure you study hard. Okay, is that clear? Everything's clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Remember, modals can change the overall meaning of a sentence depending on its usage. So, just like what we did earlier, we tried to use the same format of the sentence by using different modals, and it changes the meaning. Okay, so modals is part of um, the ways we want to express something. So if you really want to um, show a strong obligation, then use those modals that are included in strong obligation. If you want to, advise someone, then use the modals that are under the advice, suggestions, and recommendations. And that's all. Okay, that ends our discussion. So thank you very much and God bless you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am. Goodbye
ma'am.
po.
Goodbye, ma'am.
Goodbye.